Howdy, and thanks for tuning into this episode of Glossed Over. Today I'm going to be taking a look at what I believe to be the most overlooked card from the Magic the Gathering Foundation set that I think nearly everybody missed upon the set's release in 2024. Foundations was a uniquely very large set. It was coming in at nearly 730 unique cards, and not only was it one of the largest sets in recent times, it had some of the most powerful headliner creatures that we've seen in an in-universe Magic set, and in the sea of new powerhouse cards like Bloodthirsty Conqueror, Twin Flame Tyrant, and Scrawling Crawler, these ended up taking most of the attention away from the average to very good cards that the set had to offer. And this led to a lot of new, very playable cards being almost completely forgotten about. And not just the rares and mythics were powerful. Foundations also contains some of the most pushed cards we've ever seen at the lower rarities. You may know some of these more commonly seen uncommon cards, such as Vengeful Blood Witch and Boltwave, which have both respectively become commander staples. Boltwave being in any deck that cares about face damage, and the Blood Witch is a functional reprint of the ever popular Blood Artist. But did you know cards like Twinblade Blessings? This is a 1 generic, 2 white enchantment aura with flash. It gives the enchanted creature double strike. This is so powerful in any Voltron strategy or even as a combat trick and still sees little to no play. And that brings me to one card specifically that has flown under the radar for almost 2 years. It's an innocuous 1 mana uncommon equipment. It's called Fishing Pole. Now, Fishing Pole only costs 1 generic mana. It's an artifact equipment, and it gives the equipped creature the ability to pay 1 generic, tap the creature, and then tap Fishing Pole to put a bait counter onto Fishing Pole. And then whenever the equipped creature becomes untapped, you get to remove a bait counter from this equipment. And if you do, you make a 1/1 blue fish creature token, and it costs 2 generic to equip. Notably, Fishing Pole's bait counters are put on the equipment and not on the creature being equipped. It can also be forgotten, but this is technically infinite value because every single turn you get to add to your army of fishes for only 1 mana. I've also found some rather obscure uses and combos while doing my research for this video, as well as some pretty interesting commander decks that I think would really benefit from this colorless token generator. There are way too many combos to list off in one video, but I'm going to give you a couple examples just to illustrate how powerful this card can be. And kicking it off, we have its synergistic pair with Skull Clamp. Now, Skull Clamp, for those of you that don't know, is 1 generic for an artifact equipment that gives a creature +1/-1, and whenever the equipped creature dies, you get to draw 2 cards. Both these equipment are 1 generic mana and fit in a bunch of different deck archetypes. They're very efficient and can see play in artifact decks and Voltron style strategies simply because they're equipment. It's also worth mentioning that Skull Clamp can be equipped to the fish token made by Fishing Pole to draw you 2 cards. Another notable synergy is that both these equipment are searchable with the final chapter trigger on Urza's Saga. Urza's Saga says search your library for an artifact card with mana cost 0 or 1 and put it immediately onto the battlefield and then shuffle your library. Now when this triggers, you'll almost always want to grab Fishing Pole first because of its ability to continuously pump out 1/1 fish, and Skull Clamp does comparably nothing without setup. Continuing with combo examples, Fishing Pole plus Intruder Alarm can become very oppressive. For those of you that don't know, Intruder Alarm is a 3 mana, 2 generic, 1 blue enchantment that says creatures don't untap during their controller's untap steps, and then whenever a creature comes into play, you get to untap all creatures. And this works exactly how you're imagining. Intruder Alarm goes infinite with Fishing Pole, a Curious Follower, and any 1 mana producing creature, and this will make you an infinite number of 1/1 fish as long as you already had a creature equipped with Fishing Pole. Another quick combo that I think has some real legs is Fishing Pole plus Pure Steel Paladin. For only 4 mana, you get to draw a card off Pure Steel Paladin's first ability and make 0 fish, while also getting 2 bait counters if you already had a creature like Curious Follower to untap Fishing Pole with. Notably, the pole also combos with any 5 mana extra turn spell. Because Time Warp gives you another untap step on your next turn, you can then pay another mana to make another fish. And for only 9 mana, you net gain 2 total 1/1 fish and a whole nother turn. It could also be argued that Time Warp is even better than Time Walk in this combo because its ability to trigger up the beanstalk. And then another thing I've never seen anybody mention, but that I think is very important to remember, is that if Time Warp was colorless, it would only be 2 mana off triggering Ugin's Binding's second ability. Now that we've gone over combos, let's take a look at the admittedly very high baseline for Fishing Pole. Even without combo support, as soon as you make a 1/1 fish, you put the entire commander table on a 120 turn clock. And as I've mentioned before, this gives you a very powerful inevitability that cannot be ignored by the table. As early as turn 4, you can get the engine up and running. This works with any creature, but I specifically chose Kali of the Vast because she doesn't have a tap ability of her own. This makes her the perfect creature to make use of Fishing Pole because we don't lose any value by tapping her to activate its ability. On the previous turn, we equipped Kalia with Fishing Pole. Now that our next turn has come around and that Kalia is no longer summoning sick, we can tap her and Fishing Pole to add a bait counter. And we're specifically going to choose to use the Rapala DT4, but that's really up to personal preference. On the following turn, upon untapping Kalia, you can then remove your Rapala DT4 counter from Fishing Pole and create a 1/1 fish creature token that weighs close to 17 pounds and probably would have been a state record. On your next turn, you can then attack with the 1/1 fish token that is no longer summoning sick because we had it in play from last turn, and then once again you can tap Kalia to add another bait counter on the Fishing Pole. All you need to do is rinse and repeat ad nauseum until you overwhelm your opponents. This should illustrate how out of hand creating a 1/1 every turn can end up if it's unanswered. Now that you have the baseline play pattern down, let's talk about some synergy pieces. The first two I want to mention fall into the artifact category. Those are Darksteel Forge and Trash for Treasure. Fishing Pole is an artifact, which means it plays very nicely with Trash for Treasure, allowing you to sacrifice your Darksteel Forge to return Fishing Pole to play. Some more underplayed synergy pieces are Doubling Season and Thousand Year Elixir. Doubling Season simply doubles the number of bait counters you get to put on Fishing Pole. Thousand Year Elixir is also an all-star, because Fishing Pole, if you remember, grants the creature the activated ability. So this will allow you to put a bait counter on it as soon as the creature comes into play using the haste from Thousand Year Elixir. And not to mention, it allows you to pay 1, untap the creature to immediately make a fish. Many of you are probably very familiar with our next two synergy pieces. Song of the Dryads is a very powerful ramp spell, allowing you to enchant one of your fish tokens, turning it into a forest for only 3 mana. That's on rate with a hard cast Search for Tomorrow. And not to mention Pendlehaven being the best land to pair with Fishing Pole. Pendlehaven is a legendary land that taps for a green mana, or can tap to make a 1/1 creature a 2/3 until end of turn. As you can see, by tapping Pendlehaven and giving your fish that +1/+2 at instant speed, it saves them from an opposing Orcish Bowmaster trigger or a Razor Boomerang activation. Rounding off our strong synergy list, we have Training Grounds and Fisher's Talent. Now, Training Grounds, some of you may have noticed, doesn't actually reduce an ability lower than 1 colorless, but sometimes opponents don't read it all the way and assume it makes Fishing Pole's activation free, causing it to still eat a removal spell. Fisher's Talent is an amazing 10 mana investment, which turns all of our 1/1 fish into 8/8 blue octopus creature tokens. Now we've gone over the baseline, we've gone over combos, and we've gone over synergy pieces. But before I add any card to a deck I'm building, I find it very insightful to know some of the niche cases a card can be used in. The first rare case is that if you remember, the fish token is actually blue. This means if it ends up in your hand, you can actually pitch it to Force of Will, which triggers up the Beanstalk. Enter the Infinite is a sorcery that says draw cards equal to the number of cards in your library, then put a card from your hand on top of your library and you have no maximum hand size until your next turn. Now onto the hardest part of deck construction. I find it incredibly stressful to fit new cards into my commander decks, so I figured I'd give some examples of cards that I think are worth cutting to give us space for Fishing Pole, just as a guideline for you to follow. I'm going to stick with 1 generic mana cards because I want to keep my curve and pip count the same. Cards like Wooden Sphere and Sensei's Divining Top add a lot of value to our deck for only 1 generic mana. However, I think both these cards, especially Sensei's Divining Top, take a lot of time to use and generally bog down a streamlined game plan in a very non-interactive way. And I think most decks would make better use of Fishing Pole because Fishing Pole actually gives you a way to deal damage. Another card I really want to mention is Arkham Slay. Arkham Slay is 1 generic mana for an artifact that says 2 generic and tap. Attacking this turn does not cause target creature to tap. You cannot use this ability if defending player controls no snow-covered lands. As you can see, this is a very versatile 1 mana artifact, but as Magic Design has moved on, power creep has once again reared its ugly head, and I think Fishing Pole can just be more effectively used as your 1 mana artifact. Now that we all know effectively how to use Fishing Pole, let's take a look at some commanders that make the most efficient use of its abilities. Memnarch, allowing you to gain control of your Fishing Pole if another player reanimates it on their side, or commandeers it. For 11 mana, this makes it a reasonable choice. There's also Atraxa Praetor's Voice, whose ability to continuously proliferate plays very well with the Rapala DT4 counters. And if you're looking for a more aggressive deck that benefits from the use of Fishing Pole, look no further than Godo Bandit Warlord. He allows you to cheat the 1 mana cost to cast Fishing Pole with his Enter the Battlefield ability, and after he attacks for the first time, he untaps, which means while he's equipped with Fishing Pole and it has a bait counter, you get to make a 1/1 fish. I mentioned previously how the fish token is blue, and because it has a specific color, it counts towards the new Vivid mechanic from Lorwyn Eclipsed. By activating Fishing Pole just once, your Vivid count becomes 1 for the 1 blue fish. I actually have a Sun Se Young Conqueror Mono Blue Vivid Commander deck. The Young Conqueror allows you to bounce your Vivid creatures and replay them for their ETB triggers, and it plays really well with cards like Vivid Flying Fish, Rime Chill, and Vivid Creek. It aims to win the game by making fish tokens and then outvaluing your opponent, leveraging Mono Blue's access to counter magic. And just so you know that I'm not making all these combos up and pulling them out of thin air, here's a few formats that Fishing Pole sees play in. The main format you see it is Tiny Leaders and Pre-Modern Spiritually, and it's had the most competitive success in the modern format, mostly as a sideboard piece for Amulet Titan. Some examples of modern deck archetypes we've seen Fishing Pole show up in are main board in Dimir Murktide, where it makes up for the high cost of Psychic Frog and Orcish Bowmasters, and the namesake Murktide Regent by giving you an effective turn 1 play. I mentioned it saw play in a ton of sideboards as a hate piece for Amulet Titan because it makes a 1/1 blue fish. So I dug up this old Jund list from 2013, which runs 4 Fishing Poles in the sideboard, alongside classic cards like Tarmogoyf and Deathrite Shaman while it was still legal. It's also notable that Fishing Pole, being an artifact, was especially important in Jund because it added another card type for Tarmogoyf. As is tradition, I have some questions for you, the audience, at the end of the video. Did you already know about Fishing Pole? Were you aware that this card existed? And what decks do you think would most benefit from the inevitability brought by a 1 mana equipment? Also, do you know any other unique cards that deserve more spotlight? I love finding these obscure commons and uncommons from relatively large sets, and let me know if you know of anything like that. And that's all I got. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, even a little bit, or found it mildly insightful, please like, maybe subscribe if you're feeling up to it. I plan to do a lot more videos in this vein. Have a great day.